I remember the sound of the door creaking open, soft, almost hesitant. It was past midnight, and the only light in my room came from the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I looked up, expecting maybe my sister or even my dog, but instead, it was my mother standing there. Her face looked calm, but her eyes, they were distant. Off. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, watching me like she was lost in thought. I asked her if everything was okay, but she just walked in without answering and closed the door behind her. That's when everything started to feel wrong. This wasn't normal. My mother was never the type to enter my room unannounced, especially at that hour. There was a strange weight in the air, something I couldn't explain. I sat up, suddenly feeling nervous, unsure of what to expect. She sat down at the edge of my bed, quiet, like she was looking for the right words but couldn't find them. I kept asking her what was going on, if she needed help, if something had happened with Dad. But she just kept staring at the floor, like she was carrying something heavy, something she couldn't hold anymore. Our family has always looked perfect from the outside. My parents had been together for over 20 years, always showing up at events hand in hand, smiling for photos, hosting dinners for neighbors. We were the kind of family people looked at and said, I wish we had what they have. But the truth is, behind those perfect smiles were silent dinners, missed phone calls, and a growing distance that no one talked about. Not even us. That night, something shifted. The silence between me and my mother turned into a conversation I never thought we'd have. She started to speak in a voice I barely recognized, soft, emotional, almost like a confession. She told me she couldn't sleep anymore, that things hadn't been right for a long time. I tried to comfort her, thinking it was just stress or maybe a rough patch with Dad. But then she said something that made my heart stop. I made a mistake, she whispered, almost to herself. My breath caught in my throat. She didn't say what kind of mistake, but I already knew. Deep down, I knew. And I think she knew I knew too. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words. I could see it in her eyes, that guilt, that fear. And then, as if realizing she'd said too much, she stood up suddenly and started to walk out. She didn't explain. She didn't finish her sentence. She just left me there, in the middle of the night, with a heart full of questions and a mind racing to connect the dots. From that moment on, nothing in our house felt the same. What began as a quiet visit to my room had opened a door to secrets I never imagined. And little did I know, that night was only the beginning. After she walked out that night, I just sat there staring at the door, trying to make sense of everything. Her words echoed in my head, I made a mistake. Over and over again, like a broken record. I didn't sleep at all. My mind was too loud. What kind of mistake? Who was involved? Was it recent or something from years ago? My heart felt like it was being pulled in 100 directions. Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing major, that maybe I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew my mother wasn't the type to say things without meaning. The next morning, everything looked normal on the outside. She was in the kitchen making breakfast like nothing had happened. She smiled at me, offered me eggs and toast, and asked if I had any schoolwork to finish. It was like that late-night moment never happened. And that's what scared me the most, how easily she slipped back into her routine, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb into my world. I couldn't look at her the same way. I kept watching her hands as she cleaned the dishes, wondering what they had held, and who. As the days passed, I started paying closer attention. To everything. The way she jumped when her phone buzzed. How she walked out of the room to take certain calls. The quiet sighs when she thought no one was listening. I noticed my father, too, how distant he'd become. He used to come home and tell stories from work, laugh at his own jokes, check in on us one by one. But now, he barely said more than a few words at dinner. I couldn't tell if he knew something or if he was just tired of pretending. One evening, I saw her standing by the living room window, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the tone said enough. When she noticed me watching, she quickly ended the call and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was the moment I started to believe that whatever secret she was carrying, it was still alive. I started going through small things, looking for signs. Old receipts, text previews on her phone, even the way she dressed when she said she was meeting a friend. There were too many questions and not enough answers. And no matter how hard I tried to push it away, the feeling just wouldn't leave. Something was happening behind the scenes of our so-called perfect family, and I had no idea how far it had already gone. One afternoon, about a week after that strange night, I overheard something that changed everything. I was walking past the garage when I heard my mom's voice coming from inside. The door was slightly open, and I froze when I heard a man's voice respond. It wasn't my dad. It was someone else. Calm, smooth, too familiar. I didn't recognize the words, they were speaking quietly, but the tone was warm, almost intimate. I felt a chill run through me. She wasn't arguing, she wasn't nervous. She was smiling. I could hear it in her voice. That night, I couldn't even eat dinner. I sat across from her and my dad, watching them go through the motions. My mom asked about his day. He grunted a response. Then silence. I wanted to scream, to stand up and demand answers. But I didn't. I just kept chewing my food and pretending I wasn't falling apart inside. I started wondering if Dad knew. Maybe he suspected something but didn't want to face it. Or maybe he was hiding something too. The tension between them wasn't new, it had been growing for years. But now it felt sharp, like glass under our feet. In school, I couldn't concentrate. My friends noticed I was distracted, but I didn't say anything. How do you even begin to tell someone that you think your mom is cheating? That your family might be living a lie? I didn't want pity. I wanted answers. So I started watching even closer. One evening, she left the house dressed in clothes I hadn't seen her wear in years, tight jeans, a fitted blouse, perfume I hadn't smelled since I was a kid. She told my dad she was meeting her old friend Karen. But Karen had moved away last year. I knew she was lying. The worst part was the way she looked happy. Like this secret was giving her something that our home wasn't. That realization stung more than anything. What did it say about us? About my dad? About me? Meanwhile, a strange shift was happening between me and my father too. He was starting to notice my mood, asking if everything was all right. I wanted to tell him. I really did. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe I didn't want to be the one to break him. Because if what I suspected was true, then everything we believed about our family was already broken. It all reached a boiling point on a rainy Thursday evening. I remember the sky was dark even before sunset, thunder rumbling low in the distance, and the air thick with the kind of tension you can't explain but just feel in your bones. My mom had been out for hours. She left in the late afternoon, saying she had an appointment in town. But something in her voice sounded off, too rehearsed. My dad didn't even ask where she was going. He just nodded without looking up from his phone. It was like both of them had given up pretending. I stayed in the living room, lights off, just the storm flashing through the windows. Time passed slowly. Every few minutes, I'd check the driveway, hoping to see her car pull in. But it didn't. And then, right around 10 p.m., I heard it, the sound of tires crunching on wet gravel. I peeked through the curtain. It was her. But she wasn't alone. Another car stopped a few feet behind hers. A man got out. I couldn't see his face clearly, but the way he stood, the way she leaned toward him before walking inside, it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a casual goodbye. It was something more. She walked through the front door like nothing happened. Wet hair, calm face, keys in hand. My dad didn't even look up from the TV. She glanced at me, her eyes holding mine just long enough to make my chest tighten. Did she know I saw? Was she daring me to say something? That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until everyone had gone to bed. Then I snuck into the living room, pulled out her purse, and looked through her phone. My hands were shaking. I knew it was wrong, but I had to know the truth. I found it in her messages. The name was saved as Elle. The texts weren't overly romantic, but the timestamps, the late-night chats, the way they talked about our spot and last time, it was all there. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, mind spinning. And then I heard it, a soft sound from behind me. I turned slowly, and there she was. My mom, standing in the hallway, watching me with a look I'd never seen before. Not angry. Not surprised. Just caught. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one building inside that house. She didn't say a word at first. Just stood there in the dark hallway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, the glow from the kitchen light behind me casting shadows across her face. I froze. My phone was still in my hand, screen open, that last message staring back at us both. I thought she'd scream, panic, maybe try to explain. But she didn't. She just looked tired. Like she'd been waiting for this moment to happen. I guess you know now, she finally said, her voice low. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My throat felt dry, and my heart was beating so loud I was sure she could hear it. She took a few slow steps into the room and sat on the edge of the couch like it was all too heavy to carry any longer. I expected her to defend herself, to say I didn't understand. But what she said next hit me harder than I was ready for. It's not what you think, she whispered. It started because of your father. That was the last thing I expected to hear. My mind tried to make sense of it. What did she mean? She must have seen the confusion on my face, because she leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and kept talking before I could stop her. Years ago, I found out he had someone, she said, her voice trembling. Not just once. There were others. I stayed for you. For this family. But I was never the same after that. My head spun. My dad? He always seemed quiet, reserved, maybe distant at times, but a cheater? I couldn't imagine it. She went on to explain how their relationship had slowly crumbled. How trust disappeared, how conversations turned into silence, how nights turned cold. And then she said something that changed everything. Elle isn't just someone I met recently, she said. He's someone I knew before your father. Someone I let go of, and maybe I shouldn't have. I felt like the ground beneath me was shifting. Suddenly this wasn't just about one mistake. This was about years of pain, betrayal, and choices none of us ever saw. My mother wasn't just a villain in this story. She was also someone who had been broken. Someone who had tried to hold on. But what did that mean for me? For our family? For the truth I thought I knew? And just when I thought I couldn't be more shocked, she dropped the biggest twist of all. There's something else, she said quietly, almost afraid of her own words. Elle doesn't know yet, but I think I'm pregnant. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My ears were ringing. My body went numb. She stood up, tears in her eyes, and walked past me like the weight was too much to carry one more second. I didn't stop her. I couldn't move. All I knew was nothing in our lives would ever be the same again. And the real storm hadn't even started. The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual, like everyone was holding their breath. My mom didn't come down for breakfast. My dad sat at the table, sipping his coffee in silence, eyes fixed on the news playing in the background. I stared at him, really stared, trying to see what I had missed all these years. Was it true? Had he really betrayed her first? And if he had, did he regret it? I couldn't hold it in anymore. I asked him, straight out, if there was ever someone else. He didn't respond right away. He looked stunned, like he never thought I'd ask that question. Then, slowly, he set down his cup and looked me dead in the eye. "There were mistakes," he said quietly. "But they were a long time ago. And I thought we moved past them." "But did you ever tell her the truth?" I asked. His silence said everything. Before I could say anything else, my mom walked in. She looked pale, exhausted, but strangely calm. Her eyes met my father's, and something unspoken passed between them. Years of damage, pain, and silence packed into one long glance. Then she dropped the news, straight and cold. "I'm pregnant." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. My dad stood up, stunned, confused, asking the only question that mattered, "Is it mine?" She didn't answer. That was the answer. Everything exploded at once. My dad's voice rose, full of anger and heartbreak. My mom stood her ground, crying but unshaken. I watched them come apart, the truth finally ripping through every lie and quiet moment they had built to keep our family standing. For the first time, everything was out. The affairs. The regrets. The years of pretending. But just when it seemed like the worst had already happened, the final twist came, and it wasn't from them. It was from me. I looked at both of them, tears in my eyes, and said something I hadn't dared admit until that moment. "I saw you both falling apart, and I thought it was my fault. For years I thought maybe I wasn't enough to keep this family together." My voice cracked. My mom's expression softened. My dad stepped back, shaken. All this time, they had been so wrapped up in their own pain that they forgot how much I was carrying too. They thought they were protecting me by keeping things quiet. But silence doesn't protect, it just hides the damage until it's too deep to fix. As everything spilled out, the tension slowly gave way to truth. They didn't have all the answers, and we all knew things couldn't just go back to normal. But something shifted in that moment, honesty replaced the silence. And just as we thought the day had finally settled, my mom's phone buzzed. She picked it up, looked at the screen, and her face went pale. She handed it to my dad without a word. It was a message from El. He had just found out about the pregnancy. And he was on his way to our house. The knock on the door came less than an hour later. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just steady, almost hesitant. We were all sitting in the living room, frozen in a strange silence. My dad stood up, but my mom stopped him. "I'll get it," she said softly. Her hand was trembling as she reached for the doorknob. When she opened it, there he was, Elve, tall, quiet, eyes filled with worry. He didn't barge in or demand anything. He simply asked, "Can we talk?" They stepped outside into the rain-soaked porch. I watched through the window, unsure whether I wanted to see or not. My dad sat back down, rubbing his hands over his face. For a long time, neither of us said a word. It was the first time I'd seen him look small. Vulnerable. Like the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. I realized in that moment that he wasn't just angry. He was scared. Scared of losing her, of being replaced, of facing the truth he'd buried years ago. Eventually, the front door opened again. My mom walked in, wet from the rain, eyes red. Elle was gone. She stood there, silent, then looked straight at my dad. "He doesn't want to be part of this," she said. "He said the timing's wrong." He walked away. No one said anything for a few seconds. My dad slowly nodded, like something in him had just settled. My mom sat down next to him, still keeping a little distance. Then, in the quiet, she finally asked, "Can we fix this?" It wasn't a quick yes. It wasn't a dramatic moment. But it was honest. They both admitted their mistakes openly, without blaming one another. They agreed to counseling, not just for each other, but for all of us. Because the truth was, we were all broken in different ways. And none of us could fix it alone. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. Slowly, awkwardly, but sincerely. There were still hard days. Still unanswered questions. But the silence was finally gone. My mom began opening up more, especially with me. She told me about her younger years, about how Elle was her first love before she met my dad, and how she never truly let that memory go. But when she saw him again, she realized the past wasn't something she could live in. And as for the pregnancy, it turned out to be a false alarm. A scare, but one that brought everything to light. The truth hurt. But it also forced us to grow. My parents didn't magically fall back in love overnight, but they started seeing each other as people again, not just partners, not just co-parents, but individuals with flaws, regrets, and hope. And me? I stopped carrying guilt that never belonged to me in the first place. I learned that families don't fall apart from a single mistake, they crack over time when people stop talking, stop listening, stop being honest. Sometimes the ugliest truths are what finally make room for something real. That night my mother walked into my room changed everything. But maybe it needed to. 53.